The problem with us, especially in the Arab world, is that we want to reject the past so much. We don't want to talk about what happened. We don't want to talk about how bad things work, that it keeps repeating over and over. We need to sit down and have a conversation about how much we've killed each other, how much we hated each other, how much we were judging each other on religion and on gender and on all of that, so that we can heal from it as a society and move on.
Okay, so I find that fascinating. Do you believe in the patriarchy?
In what way? That it exists, or that it's a right thing to do?
That it exists.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in religion. Especially in religion.
So, can you explain to me why you would believe?
I'll explain it to you from a historical background.
Mm-hmm.
So, ancient civilizations, before they settled down, scientists discovered that the first statue ever made, was a statue of a woman. And they called her Venus of Willendorf because
Let me interrupt you. That we found so far.
That we found so far.
There we go.
But that's the earliest.
That we found so far.
Yeah. So the earliest that we found so far is a statue of a woman. And they named her Venus of Willendorf. And Venus of Willendorf was a representation of the first goddess that we found so far. Back then, people used to attribute God or goddess or the goddesses to life. And a woman is more, or when you talk about feminine energy, masculine energy, when you talk feminine, you're talking about nurture and giving life and, coming together and all that. Whereas masculine energy is much more oriented towards plan and, like calculating and stuff like that.
Hunter-gatherers.
So back then, before, most of ideas and thoughts pertaining to life was attributed to a goddess. And then when we evolved and we sat down and we built cities, that's when the patriarchy came under the form of a god who is masculine. So God no longer was attributed to a feminine energy about giving life. It is now about planning, judgment, heaven and hell, rewards, and stuff like that. So that gave birth to a system where men kind of took over because they were attributed to a god who is male, who has a male figure, masculine. And they took advantage of that thought and kind of became the rulers, put the laws, put religion, and stuff like that.
When are we talking about? What day is this? How far back we're going?
We're talking about the earliest signs of civilization that we have.
Okay.
So Mesopotamia.
Okay.
That's when the patriarchy started.
Because Greek
this is after. Greeks came 2,000 to 3,000 years after that.
Way more.
Sorry, no, Greeks. I thought you were talking about Egyptians. The
Greeks are over 5,000 years old, and Egyptians are also very, very old.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both, and both have divine female figures.
But every one of those civilizations, the father of all the gods, the god of the gods, has been male. Zeus, Neptune, Ra. All of them are head. Even in Mesopotamia, Anu was his name. All men.
Well,
all masculine.
I will have to correct you on that. First of all, Zeus wasn't the firstborn. He was, I think, the third or fourth born son. To the Titans. To
the Titans, exactly. Yeah.
His father being Kronos.
Yeah.
And his mother being Earth.
Gaia.
Gaia.
Yeah.
Thronos also had a family tree lineage as well. But this is the danger of what we experience right now is this epocha of just taking information and putting it into the way we want to see the world.
Okay, then tell me, why is it that in all Abrahamic religions there are no priestesses? Why is it only men who becomes priests and sheikhs and rabbis?
Let me ask you a more interesting question. Why do you believe that there's been hardly any society that has been totally mandatory? No, monitory. What is the opposite of a patriarchal society? It's
matriarchy.
Matriarchy.
Yeah.
Can you name me one society that was purely matriarchal?
No, which is what my point. That since society began, it was no longer a matriarchal thing. Previous civilizations, when they were still nomads, women were the head of the tribes. Men used to exist only for for breeding and for hunting. Men,
okay.
yes. It was a very matriarchal societies, all of them. In whenever tribe you would see, you would get the heads, the leaders, whoever was on top of those tribes were female. And it was men who had a secondary role.
I would disagree again with that, because if we go to aboriginary societies, is the wrong terminology, untouched civilizations.
Yeah,
it's well documented that almost every time any of those places that are we are talking about very what's the right word, primitive, are all led completely by men. So there seems to be
they're
a biological
not led by
reason.
men. If there was a tribe leader, he would still have at least one or two women who are, for example, handling alchemy or magic or religion or stuff like that. It would always go to the female. Even in tribes that we find today,
I don't disagree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So at the very least, they were equal.
But look, in Aristotelian societies, right? I mean, going back now to the 18th century, and prior, men were in charge of the household, but the household spending was the woman. Who kept the money was the women. Who did the galas events and made sure that their husbands succeeded in both political or war were always set up by women.
But you're going back like what?
Only 300 years.
Yeah. Which is led to the change that we have now, that there is more equality happening now than there was back then.
I don't think we have more equality now.
I mean, we do, because it's not like women cannot get a job, for example, cannot rule a country, for example.
What I see now more than ever is it's become now men versus women, which never happened prior to our generation.
That's a political push. That's just
it's more than just a. I mean, for me, it's the same as race hustlers. Right? There's plenty of people who are race hustlers who say, stuff like people aren't being treated fairly. We should rise up. We should fight. We need to burn down buildings.
Yep.
And I see this exact same thing with the starch-horned feminists who want to spell woman with a Y.
Yeah.
Because it has the word man in it, God forbid. Or
they write women instead of the men MXN or something.
Exactly. So
that's extremism, yani. We're not talking about that.
But that's my problem. I think we've allowed this poison, this cancer to infest our society, that we think that men and women were always fighting against each other, that women were somehow seen as lesser citizens.
Yeah.
Right?
But they were seen.
No. In fact, when the first vote was held on whether women should get the vote in the U.S., I think this was in the 1960 something.
No, much earlier.
Or much earlier. My mistake.
Yeah.
The people who were fighting mostly against it were women, because they were worried that they'd have to be then prescribed into the military, because having the vote means responsibilities that you have to carry on.
Yeah.
So it's not
which is what happened now with the war and the Ukraine and all that, and like suddenly women are like, we're not gonna, we're not feminist anymore. We're just gonna sit at home. We don't want to be drafted to the
there
war.
We go. Right. There is a danger when we allow this. Right, and we allow these crazy notions, and that men were these abusers to women. Because what does that mean to a society? Like if you teach your daughter today, saying, you know what, you've always been oppressed, and men are going to treat you like shit and everything like that, how will that affect her, not only the rest of her life, but imagine if all women were taught like that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with teaching people where we were, because what we need to do is talk about the history. We need to have that conversation and mention how bad things were, so that we appreciate how good things are now.
I disagree, and I disagree. Sorry to interrupt you all the time, because our perception of history is what the problem is.
No.
I totally think so, because we didn't live it. So all the accounts that we get from it isn't first-handed.
I'll give you an example from a political point of view, and not when women are social. So in Lebanon in 1975, there started a big civil war that happened, which lasted around 15 years. And it was purely religious war, religious, Christians versus Muslims. And between those, cracks of that war, Christians were also killing each other, and Muslims were also fighting each other, and everyone was fighting each other. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with another sect in Lebanon called the Druze. Do you know about them?
No idea at all.
Okay, so this is a group of people who mostly live in the mountains of Lebanon, and back when Lebanon was still under the Ottoman Empire, they did not want to convert to Islam. They were Christians. They don't want to convert to Islam, so they faked a religion, which now became full mainstream. That religion says that they basically took from everyone. So they pray as if they are Muslims, but they also believe in Jesus, but they also believe in Isa as a prophet. They believe in reincarnation, but they believe in the one God. So they just took from everything. And that group used to fight in the civil war. There was a lot of fighting happening between Christians and the Druze. Everything's fine, people were talking about it, okay, the war finished and all that. I discovered recently that in 1800, exactly 100 years before that, the Christians and the Druze were also fighting in a war in the mountains of Lebanon over lands and over resources. No one was talking about it. No one ever taught in history books, in schools, in this, that there was a problem between these two groups of people, and that this hate got passed on through generations, and then it resurfaced again in the civil war, and it's going to keep happening. The problem with us, especially in the Arab world, is that we want to reject the past so much. We don't want to talk about what happened. We don't want to talk about how bad things were, that it keeps repeating over and over. We need to sit down and have a conversation about how much we've killed each other, how much we hated each other, how much we were judging each other on religion and on gender and on all of that, so that we can heal from it as a society and move on. Every time we try to have a conversation, a couple of weeks ago, there was a post talking about slavery in the Arab world, and that slavery existed in the Arab world. This is not slavery that was not invented by the whites of Europe. It was in the Arab world. It was in Africa. It was in the East. Every civilization at some point had slaves from another group of people. And when they posted about it, and yes, slavery existed in the Arab world, everyone went crazy. We should not be talking about this. You're making Arabs look bad. You're making this look bad. No, we should be talking about the past. We should be talking about women who were oppressed because they were, and how now they're not. Because if we don't compare, everyone's going to think they're a victim all the time.
I understand that, but when you bring up terms like women were oppressed, we don't see it as a larger picture. Prior to, I think, when was the first women products invented? 1960 or something like that. They couldn't really join the workforce, right?
True.
Okay. And then since women have joined the workforce, what has occurred?
What has occurred?
Salary's been cut in half because there's twice as much available as labor. The salary of what one person could contribute to a family isn't possible today.
But that's not because the woman got traded. That's because see, that's the problem. We always look at racial issues, gender issues, religious issues, when it's always been a class issue. Everything that has happened through everyone in the history of recorded, it's always been a class of people who are extremely rich and powerful, and then they throw problems at the lower classes, fight among each other. This gender issue that we're talking about now, and what happened in the past 10 years, where suddenly there's a boom there's a gender identity problem, there are women problem, everyone's oppressed, everyone's hating everyone, all that stuff. This didn't exist before because we were distracted by other stuff. It's always, all the time. The reason why now men and women don't make enough money to uphold the household, to raise a family, is not because women joined the workforce. It's because CEOs have multiplied their earnings by 600, 700%, whereas the minimum wage has stayed down or even went below, because inflation happened and no one is doing anything about it. These are the reasons. But they don't want you to look at the real issue. They don't want you to look at how money is manipulated all the time, and how only all the laws and all the rules benefit that 1% of the 1%.
Okay, when you're talking about what's the correct term, the bourgeoisie, in that class, right? People don't seem to grasp that the top 1% of wealth, top 0.1%, top 0.0001%
Yeah.
aren't cash rich. They're invested. They used all their money
Of course.
to buy stocks, to buy companies, to make
it's how much
product.
they're worth. There are people who are listed on Forbes top, and there are people who are not listed on the top. Some people like pay money so they're not listed as to how we're talking the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the inventors of the
bloodlines. First of all, can we both come to a census and say people live better lives today than they did 100 years ago?
That's also debatable.
Do you not think your life expectancy is longer? Do you not think generally people
I
are
happier?
safer? Well, forget happier. Do you think
that's the difference. Because what technology did and what medicine did and all that was make everything easier, more accessible. You live longer. Life expectancy is now much higher. You're healthier. Even with all the wars that we're hearing about and all that, we are still in the safest times of all of mankind, like they say. So I agree.
Is that
with
fair?
That is 100% fair. However, it did not make us better people.
Can we both agree that both our grandparents weren't able to read? Because I can generally
Pretty
over
much. Okay.
80% of the population 2 to 3
Illiterate,
generations ago, when asked to sign a piece of paper, wrote an X.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed. Yeah.
So we have the mobility and the accessibility to now not just create careers and educate ourselves, which no generation prior to the 80s ever had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we look at it from the data analysis shows, this is specifically in the US at the moment because this is where most of the data studies are conducted.
Yeah.
People, when shown between a 10-year gap of where they are both in income and capacity title, tend to move upwards. And we're talking about over 80 to 95% of people who are the very bottom.
Oh yeah.
Move up.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So there is a positive notion of upwards trend.
But move up in what under what aspect?
Income, ability to purchase.
That's not true. Income now you get paid less than your parents did, by the way.
Yes, but if you
so you're not moving up.
No. But if you start today, say you're born today, you join the workforce.
Okay.
Right. 10 years from this point, you have more than you had previously.
Okay, I got what you mean. Okay, so how much my growth is basically over that amount of period. Okay, I got you.
It's fair what you're saying that your purchase capacity is less than your parents. Yes.
Yeah.
But your potential of moving upwards is a lot higher than what your parents had the ability of.
I definitely agree.
Right?
Yeah. Because it took them maybe 30 years to be able to buy that car, for example, or to do something or whatever, where it takes us a lot less time to achieve. I agree.
I mean, there's that old adage, right, of owning the golden watch.
Okay.
Working 40 years, and then for your retirement, the company would give you that watch.
Yes.
And that's what everyone, dreamed about.
Exactly.
And if you switch jobs more than maybe 2 or 3 times, you were shunned upon. You were a troublemaker.
Yeah. Like, why are you changing jobs so much? I'm not going to hire you anymore.
Exactly.
That's true.
That's all disappeared.
Whereas now, it's 2 or 3 years at a specific job, and then you move. That's the average for everyone.
Absolutely. People are more connected, are more educated. People have a greater ability. If you're born in Lebanon, you don't have to spend the rest of your life in Lebanon.
Yep.
Which I guarantee you, most people in the history of planet did not have that ability.
Exactly. Yep. Agreed.
So when there's such a dangerous aspect, at least to me, when you talk about the communism aspect of saying, well, you know what, we're downtrodden, we're fucked, we're in trouble. We're like, hey, you know what? It's not that bad.
That's true. That is correct. Yeah.
There's a very famous philosopher. I forgot his name. I'll send it to you. He does a great speech, and he says, the key to happiness is misery.
Okay.
And he says that
sounds like Descartes, maybe, or Jean-Paul Sartre.
No, he's alive.
He's alive. Okay.
He's from Poland. I forgot his name at the moment. And he said that the society was most happiest if they could only eat meat 3 days a week.
Okay.
Because they feel it was cherished. It's something that's
to look forward to.
It's not so little that you're like fighting, be like, you know what?
Yeah.
And it's not so much that it's an abundance that you don't care.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting, even what you're saying about the you have to remind, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. But I was reading an article about this, psychologically, because we are very tribal people, no matter how
We
much
had
we want
this,
to
yeah.
fight it, right? And it says that as a human, as a brain, you can only have a capacity for a maximum of 100 or 150 person in your life where you can interact with. And
I know
not,
exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and not the same amount even. Like within a tribe, you have maybe more interaction with your immediate family than with the other families and stuff like that. But now, because of social media and the news and TV and all that stuff, you are getting so much more information than you can handle, than you're supposed to handle, even on a biological level. Like, I worry about, for example, how in the States there was the school shooting, right? A couple of weeks ago, everyone's talking about it. I started thinking about it and all that. But it has zero impact on my life, like zero. It literally does not change anything in my immediate surrounding, my family, my son, anything like that. So, but I'm still carrying that stress, which I'm not supposed to carry. So, in the back of our heads, we have now started to feel like, yeah, the world is really bad, everything's so bad, wars and people dying and diseases and stuff like that. Where in fact, it's really not that. Like when you look at your own small tribe of people who are around you, everyone seems to be doing okay, everything's fine. You know? So.
By the way, sorry, I'm smiling at you because what you're talking about, Aristotle wrote about 3,000 years ago. And he talked about how specifically information, as long as it's not relevant to your own survival, is not important.
Yeah.
And because, you know, if you go back 3,000 years ago, people also had issues. How's the farm doing? Are we going to go to war with our neighbors?
Exactly. Right? But they did not know, like the Greeks did not have problems of the Egyptians, for example. You know, like, are they going to be able to grow the crops, or was there a war happening? They did not know about it. Unless it affected them, unless it reached the historic step, that's when they worry about it.
You assume that traders who wasn't trading with Egypt would bring back news, and that public would... News took longer to spread.
A lot longer.
But people still had worries.
Yes, but it's not in the amount that we have now and the speed. Like, that's what you're saying about like the traders and how long it takes. Now it's like one day there's this issue, okay, it goes away, the next day a new issue is coming. We are working at such high speed in our brains that it's not healthy at all, and it really, you know.
You make a really interesting point, because I have stopped, and maybe to my own detriment, I have stopped looking at anything that is news.
Yeah.
Total.
Very good.
Very good. I can't. Yeah. I just can't. I'm having difficulties with Google, because if I'm looking for a very specific source, or if I'm looking to a very specific study that is against whatever the mainstream media is saying, it is almost impossible to find.
Exactly.
And with Twitter, it's generally in my belief that it's only two people who are there: people who are overinvested.
Yeah.
And bots. I just like the comments that I read at some posts. I think, well, there's no genuine human being
talks like
who would say that. This has nothing to do with anything.
I haven't been on Twitter for like 6 years now. Like nothing. I don't even open the word. I can't even have it on my phone even. It's just completely like a word that I don't want in my life anymore, because it's extremely toxic.
It's the same for me on Instagram. I don't look at any reels. I don't look at videos. I don't look at pictures. The only thing I use is the content potential guests that come on, and I look through their feed and be like, okay, this looks interesting. Blah blah blah. Done.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how people are obsessed.
Even the access to information is now being controlled so much that it's terrifying. Yani. Let's not kid ourselves when it comes to, I don't know if we talk about this, like what happened in 2020 and the pandemic and all that. And it's like, if you're not in one direction and talking about a specific thing, that you are actually getting limited, or your posts are getting deleted or stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, there isn't even room for discussion anymore, or asking like, is this the right way to do it? Is this healthy? Is this not healthy? You can't even ask that. It's like, that's it. That's the only way you're going to think.
The worst thing of it, I'll take it a step further. Both of us are content creators, right? Yeah. Both of us would have more success in our lives, more fulfilling lives, if we would both live in the West. And that's the really scary part, because it naturally, you can say what you want. The algorithm pushes its favorites.
Yep.
And it pushes geographically based.
Yeah.
And if you're resident in the US, you will do a hell of a lot better than someone in the UK. And the UK person will do a hell of a lot better than someone in the Middle East.
In the Middle East, of course. Yeah. I felt it as well, Yani. It's much more difficult to reach audience.
I think what needs to happen is that we need to either create our own servers, our own web portals, our own format.
We're too busy fighting each other, and
I don't think so.
The Arabs. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about what I read today morning, something about a crime that took place and all that. But it's just like there is a level of backwards here that.
Yeah, but crimes occurs everywhere, you know.
It's not about the crime. It's about what people were talking about in the crime. Like, it's really heartbreaking.
But do you know those people are real?
I mean,
do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah,
because the amount of comments I read, and it just, I think to myself, well, clearly this is either an algorithm pushing content out or comments out to inflate or to upset.
Yeah.
Right? To get an emotional response. Because no genuine human being.
Because they even care about your engagement with that. So even if what you're reading, like, if it's going to make you angry and you're going to type, you're going to respond to it and engage with it, then the algorithm is going to feed you another one later on. Because, he's engaged, will engage more.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
I think there's real credence to that. Obviously, unless we can somehow look at the code, we'll never be able to tell for sure.
True.
But I mean, even if I see someone if I see a reel or somebody funny, like falling like down and hurting himself, and I go, ha, very funny, and I read the comments, some of the stuff in there, you know, you're like, you should have died and stuff like that. Like, this is not a human being. This is something else. This is a bot. This is.
It's there to trigger people, basically, and to get something out of you, yani.
Because at the end of the day, social media isn't a real place. It's not a destination. It's not a townhouse.
It's not real. It's not. Yeah.
None of these people are real. At least to me, they're not real. These people online, because they're not sitting with me in a room.
Yeah.
Right.
And if they were, they would have a very different conversation.
I think so.
You know what I mean? Like, even no matter how aggressive they would be online, they're not gonna get that aggressive in person. There's always going to be a much muted and toned down, well, I think that maybe we should go like that. Whereas, you know, online, it's like, this is horrible and we have to do this.
Well, that's because also a lot of these people feel like they're, well, if we're assuming that they're real people, I think a lot of these people feel like they're unheard in their lives. You know, and Joe Rogan makes this great point. He says most men live quiet lives of misery.
Yeah.
And I think there's really something genuine towards that. And we risk coming into a situation, to bring it back into the patriarchy, that's going to acerbate, and that we're going to find ourselves in a society that women and men will really go at each other's throats.
I think that's human nature, sadly.
I don't think so.
I think there's something within us that is always drawn to conflict.
You know, I've heard of genuine people who said to me, well, you know what? Since Roe v. Wade, you know, with it was an overturn about abortions that occurred in the US.
Yeah, okay.
That some of their girlfriends have come up to them saying, well, I'm not going to have sex with you anymore because it's your gender's fault. Where you're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And then they were shocked, their girlfriends, that the boyfriend just was like, all right, fuck off then, you know. This is not the kind of crazy you want to invite into your house.
That's what I feel like when it comes to, if I want to go into more conspiracy and stuff like that, that whenever stuff like that happen, like I always try to, okay, so they're telling me to look there, so that, you know, at this, like, let's say this abortion, so everyone was looking there, like, why are they telling me to look there? What's on this side? You know what I mean? This happens quite a lot, where they pass so many laws and so many stuff that happen in the same time when something very loud is happening. It's like, let's just, you know, pass this so that no one will notice it.
There's a fantastic book. It's called The Fixer by...
Bradley Tusk?
Tusk. Okay, I wasn't too far off.
Bradley Tusk. Okay.
So that's a fantastic book. I really recommend you reading it.
Okay.
And it's all about political science.
Okay.
And he talks about how most politicians can be folded into 4 categories, which is they're attention seekers, meaning they're doing something because they want the attention of the crowd, or so then there's the backbenchers.
Okay.
Meaning people who had the fun and they enjoy the election process, but they don't want to
work.
They don't want to govern.
Okay.
They're not interested in that part.
Okay.
Then there's a pay to play.
Okay.
Which means that they're interested there to make money.
Okay.
Meaning you're a business, you want to change some laws, you talk to me, we get this done.
Okay.
And finally, the true believers.
Okay.
You know, you're
Really want to make a difference.
You really want to make a difference. Bernie Sanders, for example, he's a great example of one of those true believers. And so when they make a decision, you have to first think a politician, in your opinion, which one of those four categories do you think he falls on? And remember that any decision that politician makes is based on his base.
Okay.
Meaning that if he's a Democrat, he wants to make sure that the unions are happy.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's his base. That's who's voting him in.
Yeah.
So if you look at New York, for example, with Mayor Bloomberg, his base were moderate liberal.
Okay.
So the actions and laws he put in place wasn't for the benefit of all New York. It was for the benefit of his base who voted him in.
Sure.
And that makes logical sense because what does he want? He wants to be reelected.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
And so when you're looking at why these laws are passed and why these notions are made, you have to think to yourself, being like, who is he doing it for?
Yeah.
Is he doing it for a big company because they want to make profit and it's paid to play and putting dollars in his pocket? Or is it because he wants to make sure that he's going to get reelected? And it's simple as that. Because in the end of the day, politicians aren't, mastermind geniuses. You don't get out of CERN and you're like, I'm gonna be the mayor of,
go to a governor,
the governor or the president. You're gonna be like, you know what? I want to make some money.
but this is what's always like. It's not about what kind of laws they release. It's more to me about how much is gonna create. Like they're gonna stir the pot, gonna get people talking. They're gonna do things, and that's when they do. Like, for example.
But that's the media, though. Media and politicians are very different.
Not very different if you really look into it, because
look at Trump.
The media would look at what the media wanted Trump out. I mean, the liberal media wanted Trump out. Fox and the others were like, he's a god, yani. So again, but once everyone is on the same page, like for example, when a couple of years ago, under Obama's administration, gay marriage was allowed. Right, so now it became in the US completely, where everywhere there is gay marriage. That's fine. Everyone was celebrating in the streets and happy, and they're doing and all that, and every media channel was talking about it. The same week, they actually they passed a law for the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Agreement between the US and Europe, where it kind of basically the taxes that are going to be paid for the what do you call it?
The pipeline?
When things come to the country, they
sure.
Shipping and
You're talking about imports.
Imports. Okay, that money will actually go from the taxes, and not from the government supported budget and stuff like that. And it actually increased. It ended up raising the tax value for each, and no one noticed it. No one was talking about it. It passed in the same week where everyone else was celebrating. This is not a coincidence. No one does this stuff out of like, oh, it just happened. They were like, let's keep the people busy with something extremely outrageous and big and all that. And that's where we pass the laws that actually benefit us.
But your assumption is that the media isn't also controlled by a wealthy guy who stands to benefit.
That's what,
right?
but on the opposite, it is controlled,
exactly.
Which is why the media pushed for that and did not report that.
But that's my point, is that the media isn't so much controlled by politicians, but more controlled about people who...
Not the politicians, because like you're saying, it's not the politicians who are putting the laws anyway. It's the big corporates and big pharma and big oil and all that stuff. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that those are the people who go after the politicians who release certain laws who will benefit those big corporations.
That I agree
that's
with.
what it is.
That I agree with. I agree with that. Yeah, 100%.
Which is why I feel like as well, all the issues that we're talking about in these past few years, all the social stuff that are happening, it's all a front to much bigger issues. Like, for example, they were when in 2012 there was this Occupy Wall Street, because after the crash of the housing bubble in the US in 2008, 2009, which like bankrupt thousands and millions of people, and all the banks closed and all the economy completely got destroyed, no one was held accountable. Okay, so all the money that happened...
Technically, one banker went to jail.
One banker, exactly. That one poor guy. And everyone else got scot-free. So people were like, okay, 3 years passed and nothing happened. We're going to start occupying Wall Street. they started having protests in the streets, in Wall Street, and it went on for a while. And then after a while, it just kind of disappeared. And then you have a rise. And if you see the graph, it's kind of insane because the topic of gender identity began in 2012 after the Wall Street thing happened. It's kind of like you see the search on Google, how it went the opposite direction, and everyone kind of like got so, distracted by this new topic, and now it's like through the roof, and now it's all the problems of the world are related to this, and no one is talking about class issues and financial problems that are real, that are actually real.
Interesting that you bring that up, because I find that racial issues is purely an American thing. In the West, mostly, right? If you go to mainland China and you ask about like a transvestite, they're going to be like, what are you talking about, right?
Sure.
You go to like sub-Saharan Africa, you go to those places, you go to the Middle East and they look at you like, a woman is a woman. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
That was never a question.
Yeah.
It only became a question in the last 10 years.
In the US, exactly.
And it's scary, the level of influence it's occurred, and it further segments my worry about when you say the patriarchal society. Sorry to bring that back in.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of women who are coming out and saying, I'm trans. I feel like I'm a man, right? They do the operation, they do the hormone treatment. Some even as early as 8 or 9 years old.
Which is child abuse, if you ask me, but okay.
It is, to me, it's insane.
Yeah, same.
Only because a lot of these women who have these transactions say, well, it's more beneficiary for me to be a man. I feel more empowered being a man. And that is the key danger of when you put
No, I agree with you completely.
And say, one is this, one is that.
I agree completely with you that today's world is not as bad as it was before when it comes to a patriarchal society or whatever. I believe personally that there's a lot more equality than there was before. It's mostly like when you want to talk about actual feminism, like the real thing, not whatever is happening now. But it was always about equal opportunity. It's always been about that. That's it.
Feminism isn't about equal opportunity. Feminism is about women's right. Equality is about equal opportunity. There's a difference correct. In the terminology that people don't want to admit.
That's correct. However, there was a form of like, even if there was going to be equality among men, okay, women were still outside of that to an extent. And I'm not saying that women should be in the workforce or women should be here or men should do this. I am all for if a couple agrees that the man sits at home and if that's what he wants and she's the breadwinner, or the opposite. To me, whatever works in a couple works. The only difference is that it has to be their choice. That's the only difference. When I hear, for example, in our culture as well, that no, I do not want my wife to work, and then it's painted under, but I'll give her money and I'll give her all that stuff, all that. It's not, to me, I wouldn't agree anyone to tell me what they want me to do. Even if my wife would, if someone there, she's gonna tell me, no, I want you to work while I sit at home. I don't agree with that.
Okay, there's a few things to take apart here. The notion and the ideology of that is very nice and very fine. It's very great as a thinking practice, but is it applicable into the world? Well, look at Norway or Scandinavian countries. They have done more than any other society in history to equalize everything. And what have they found? More men do typical men jobs and more women do typical female jobs.
That's fine.
Why did that happen? When you take all other biasness out, when you make it as equal and as possible, the biological differences become enhanced.
I agree.
Now, when you're saying to me about women work, men work, however you want to describe it, children need to have somebody at the home. Full stop.
I get where you're going, but what you're referring to is not men and women. What you're referring to is masculine and feminine energy, and that's a very big difference, and I'll tell you why. Me as a man, because of my circumstances in my life, I grew up in a very women-oriented household. So I have my mom.
You don't say.
My sister, women around me. Even like I didn't even know my grandfather. He died before I was born, so I only know my grandma, my aunts There was a lot of women in my life. Okay, that influenced me to have much more feminine traits than masculine traits. For example, in a way, in the way I speak with women, in the way I communicate. It's been much easier for me to do that than my friends who are guys who grew up with brothers and stuff like that. There's a difference between man, woman, and masculine and feminine. We all have both in us, but we have a dominant trait. That's the difference. When we talk masculine traits, we talk about the breadwinner, the nest, controlling the nest in terms of finances, in terms of the plan, in terms of discipline, stuff like that. When we mention feminine traits, we are more nurturing. We are more.
I was going to switch that. I was going to switch that.
No, because men are more purpose oriented. You need to have a purpose. You have a different. Like I said, it's much more disciplinary in terms of how I'm gonna, how is my son gonna go or my daughter is gonna go? How I'm gonna protect them? How I'm gonna do all that? The feminine energy is more life-giving, is more loving, nurturing, growing that nest, not protecting the nest.
Counter argument: how often does your dad tell you can't go out? Sorry, how often, because you're raised mostly with girls, but how often would a father say, hey, you know what, you can't go to see your friends? And how often will your mom say, oh, I don't want you to go out with your friends?
No, I don't think there's a difference. No,
there's a huge difference. What about you, Dan? Do you know what I'm talking about, or not so much?
Me personally?
Yeah.
My mom's less hesitant to send me out.
Really? Am I the only one who then was?
That's because it's not a woman and a man thing. That's what I'm saying. It's a trait. It's a masculine or a feminine trait. For example, my mom was had a lot more masculine traits. She's completely devoted to her job. She was more oriented towards bringing the money, taking care of the finances. My dad was the one who would cook, who would fix the house, who would do that. And usually you would attribute them to the opposite sex because that's what we know, and that's what most of things are. That's most people are. But that's what I'm referring to, that there's a very difference in what kind of traits you exhibit, what kind of energy you have versus who you are as a person. That does not mean that I'm saying that there is no gender, or that anyone, whatever they feel like they are. No, I'm saying, okay, I'm a man, but I admit that I have more feminine traits.
No, I agree with what you're saying. If you're talking about an individual basis on what is designated as man or female traits, change radically.
Yeah.
In different continents, different societies, different everything, right? There's a few stable things that are always the same: protection, earning, making sure that there's food on the table.
Yeah.
These are always there. They're always fundamental. Now, when we're talking about more specifically about childbearing and raising, there's the old adage again: it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And even in Islam, in law, after 8 years old, where does the child go?
With the mom. With the
dad.
The dad, yes.
Right?
Yes.
And there's a reason for that, because our ancestors aren't dumb. They didn't set these things up because they were like, you know what?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Exactly.
They did it because they looked and they analyzed.
And it
they
worked
said,
for an extremely long time.
Exactly. Yeah. It made sure that people were fed. It made sure that they survived. They did their best to get to where we are here, right? And so we have to give credence where credence is due.
True. I agree.
And so I think there is truth, and I think the thing that is missing in this society, especially in the West, less so in the Middle East, alhamdulillah, so far, is that less sons are spending time with their fathers, either going to their job, doing activities.
I agree.
Even
when you look at this propaganda, about the father figure being absent or not non-existent. There's a picture I saw where there's a magazine called Parents, and almost every issue is a single mom with kids. There's no dad, and it's called Parents. It's not even called parent or whatever. So I agree that there is definitely a propaganda. There's a push for specific agendas about the breakup of the family, or the presence of a man versus the presence of a woman. And I am with the idea that each person or each sex brings something to the family. We're not the same. We are equal, but we're not the same.
But I think we both can agree on this statement: is that if you go back in the past, we go back to 1930, we go back to 1940, when your dad was a bricklayer, regardless, you learned that skill.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
You
Yeah.
followed him onto the job.
Okay.
Right? Because school wasn't that long. You had 3 to 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then you were expected to earn for the family.
صح.
صح?
Yeah, yeah.
And there is something wholesome and there is something missing in our character, our stature. And I think that's why a lot of people have this very brittle and weak characters, because they lack that drive. They lack that hey, you know what? I mean, from 12 or 8 or 10, whatever, you were out, you were with your dad or with your mom helping the household. If your mom was a cleaner, if you were a daughter or son or whatever, you'd go to the house and help clean. That's how it was.
True. But I think the reason why it's not here now and it's not available or present in our day-to-day job, day-to-day life, everything today, is because it's not because, we need to be equal, so both need to. It's like it became a necessity because of how bad the financial, like a man right now, or one person from the family cannot provide for his family. Like it's physically impossible for a family to live on one salary. It's impossible.
I agree with
you. It's not because now both have to work. It both have to work. It's reverse. It's kind of like the fact that both work and barely see the children and barely spend time together is the result of the society we live in, or of the political and financial landscape that we're living in. It's not the opposite.
Let me give you...
This did not cause the collapse of the economy that we live in today.
I think there's more to unpack with your statement, because you take into account who's raising your child now. It's not the family, it's the school.
Yeah.
It's not
the
state.
And the internet.
And the internet.
Yeah.
But it's the state that is now teaching your kids from morning at 10 or 9, whenever school starts, all the way until 3.
7:30. Yeah.
7:30, right?
Yeah.
So they make sure that whatever dogma they want in is in. And it's not been any different than when children went to the church to go and learn.
Exactly.
It's the same system.
This is the way you have to think. This is the way you
and it fascinates me to no degree and to no end how people will, when they said, my son was homeschooled, they look at them, they're like, homeschooled.
Even though it's a lot better.
Like my child is with 30 other kids.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
That's not a good thing. That's not... this brings me to something that I've spoken about before as well, which is how bad the educational system is. Like it's absolutely horrendous. If you think about what we learned in school and how much we actually use that in our daily life, and it's practically non-existent. Like we did not learn the necessities of life. There was no
how to make money,
how to save money, how to fix your car, how to cook, how to have a conversation with someone, love languages, sexual education, anything related to what you can, deal with day-to-day life, how to become a better human. It's all put on the side, and all you're learning are these concepts and ideas that you never end up using unless you have to teach them in school, which is like literally a pyramid scheme. You know what I mean? Like my sister is a math teacher, and she went to university and studied math, so that she becomes a math teacher. She's not using it anywhere else other than in that complete scheme. You know what I mean? And this I heard about this, which completely like shocked me. And this goes back to like the early 1800s, when schools, the way they are now, became more mainstream and became popular. And the reason why they were that way is because it was at the start of the Industrial Revolution, and they needed people who, because they were all farmers and gardeners and stuff like that, and they needed people who would know how to operate machinery in the industrial cities, but not have them become too smart that they would open their own business and stuff like that.
Sure.
I mean, when I have people who come to the place, and one time I was sitting with them and they were like, you know why we love to come here? Because you don't make us feel you want our money.